You know that gut feeling that creeps up on you, quiet, sinister, whispering that something just isn't right. I had it. I ignored it. Until I couldn't. What I saw next shattered everything. I didn't want to believe it at first. The small shifts, the offhand changes, they felt too petty to point out, too light to carry any weight. But you know when something's wrong. Even if you can't explain it, even if you try to push it down, your body knows. And my body had started whispering warnings before I could admit them to myself. Marianne had always been predictable. Her routine was the kind you could set a clock to. Wake at 6, coffee by 6:15. Out the door with Barney by 7 sharp. She'd return by 7:40. Cheeks flushed from the cold or the sun, depending on the season. Then she'd spend the next few hours tidying, reading, crocheting, humming old Motown songs. Peaceful, simple, familiar. But that routine had shifted. It started when she began sleeping in. Not drastically, just enough that I noticed. Then came the perfume. It wasn't one I recognized, and I know all of hers. Every bottle I'd ever bought her over the years. This one was muskier, unfamiliar, and oddly strong for someone who usually didn't like loud smells, as she called them. I made a comment about it one morning, something light, teasing. She brushed it off with a shrug and said it was a sample from a neighbor. But the neighbor in question had moved out 6 months ago. I didn't mention it. The next oddity was the door. Our bedroom door. Pluck. We never locked it. Not during the day. Not ever. But now, twice in 1 week, I found myself trying to open it and hearing that soft click of resistance. When I asked her, she smiled and said, "Oh, I was folding laundry and didn't want Barney in." Logical enough. But I couldn't shake the image of her face when she said it. It wasn't the words. It was the slight delay before they came, like she was flipping through excuses before picking one. Then Barney, our dog, the golden retriever we raised from a pup, began acting strangely. He'd always been loyal to both of us. But now, he wouldn't come when I called him. He'd stand at the edge of the room, watching me with eyes I couldn't read. Not scared, not angry, just distant, like I was no longer part of whatever secret bond he had with her. He slept in her corner of the room, followed her to the bathroom, whined when she left, ignored me entirely. I chalked it up to aging. Maybe he was developing quirks, like old people do. Still, it gnawed at me. One night, I came home from a short walk and found them in the living room. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, whispering to him. Their faces so close it looked like they were sharing a secret. When she noticed me, she jumped a little. Her smile was wide, too wide, and she said, "We were just playing." Barney barked once, sharp, sudden, and didn't wag his tail. That same evening, I noticed a broken wine glass in the trash. We hadn't had wine in months. Marianne had sworn off alcohol after her sister's liver failure 2 years ago. I asked her if she'd had a drink. She said no. Said it was old. Then she changed the subject. By this point, I felt like a man standing knee-deep in rising water, refusing to admit the floor was flooding. But the final straw wasn't something big. It was something so small it almost didn't register. I caught her staring at me one night. Not in a loving way. Not even a curious way. It was analytical, like I was a puzzle she had already solved, and was now reconsidering the pieces. Her expression was flat. Her eyes were cold. And when I asked, "What's on your mind?" she blinked and said, "Nothing at all," with a voice that didn't match the look. That was when I knew, not that she was cheating, not that she was lying, but that something I didn't understand, had taken root in the woman I had loved for 36 years. Still, I didn't rush. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her. I watched. I waited. And I listened. The details were wrong. The air in the house felt heavier. The dog's behavior kept changing. Some nights, I'd find dog hair in the bed even though Barney wasn't allowed up there. One morning, she had a scratch on her wrist she didn't remember getting. When I mentioned maybe seeing a doctor, gently, respectfully, she laughed. Not a mean laugh. A dismissive one, like I'd said something childish. "You worry too much," she said, stroking Barney's head without looking at me. That's when I began planning. Quietly, carefully, without any anger. Because this wasn't a fight. It was a question. And soon, I was going to find the answer. I didn't want to do it. I really didn't. The idea of putting cameras in my own home, of secretly recording my wife, after everything we'd been through together, it felt wrong, like a violation of something sacred. But something deeper inside me whispered, "You're not violating anything that hasn't already been broken." And that voice was louder than my guilt. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, just to prove that I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid dramatic, maybe even a little jealous of how attached she'd grown to Barney. I wasn't expecting anything, not really. But I couldn't go on with the questions echoing in my head, bouncing around until I couldn't sleep. So I went online, did my research, and ordered 2 small cameras. Discreet, high resolution, motion triggered, no flashing lights, no sounds, just quiet truth. I installed the first one in the hallway, angled to catch anyone entering or leaving the bedroom. The second one went inside the bedroom itself, tucked carefully behind the stack of hardback novels she never read but insisted on keeping. The lens was small enough to be invisible. I tested them both, synced them with a private cloud, and waited. The first few days were uneventful. Normal even. She made breakfast. She cleaned. She took Barney on his walks. Everything seemed fine, on the surface. But when I watched the footage closely, frame by frame, I noticed patterns. Subtle, strange ones. Every time she came back from her morning walk, she'd close the bedroom door behind her. For exactly 20 minutes. Not 15, not 30, 20. Then she'd come out, looking just a little different. Almost euphoric. Barney always came out first, trotting ahead with this strange, alert posture, as if he was guarding her. Or worse, leading her. Then, on day 4, I caught something I couldn't unsee. She was in the bedroom, the blinds drawn. No light, but a single flickering candle near the dresser. She stood in front of the mirror, still in her walking clothes. Slowly, she peeled them off. Not hurriedly, not casually, but almost ceremonially. Every motion deliberate. She wasn't watching herself. She was watching Barney, who sat perfectly still at the foot of the bed, eyes locked on her. It was the way he looked at her that sent a chill down my spine. Not like a pet, not like a dog, like something else, something aware. She knelt in front of him and whispered. The camera couldn't pick up audio at that distance, but her lips moved steadily. She was saying something, chanting maybe. Her eyes never left his. Then she placed both hands on his face, and for the briefest moment, he didn't blink. He didn't pant. He didn't move like a dog. He stared straight into her, completely still, and she smiled like she was looking at an old lover. A knowing smile. A smile that didn't belong in our marriage. The footage shook me. Not because it was erotic. Because it wasn't. It was intimate, yes, but in a way that felt off. Wrong. Like watching something sacred being twisted into something unrecognizable. The next day, it got worse. I watched as she entered the room, locked the door, and brought out a small, black box from under the bed. She opened it on the nightstand. Inside was a blade, thin, curved, clean, and a glass vial. I leaned in closer to the screen, heart thumping like a war drum. She didn't hesitate. She made a shallow cut on her left palm and let the blood drip into the vial. Then she poured it, just a few drops, into Barney's water dish. Barney didn't hesitate either. He drank it. I froze, rewound, watched it again. She gave him her blood, and he drank it. Who does that? Who thinks that's normal? My stomach turned as I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was performing some strange health ritual. Maybe she'd read about it online. Maybe it was a one-time thing. But deep down, I knew better. I had just witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. Something secret. Something ancient. And it wasn't over. The footage went on. She sat on the edge of the bed, rocking slowly, whispering to him again. Then she lay down next to him. Not beside him like a pet owner, but curled into him, head resting on his flank. Her hand never left his fur. And as she closed her eyes, she began humming. That humming, it was familiar. Not in melody, but in feeling. Like a lullaby I'd never heard before but somehow recognized. It didn't comfort me. It chilled me. I turned off the video. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just emotional distance. This wasn't a woman falling out of love. This wasn't infidelity in any normal sense. It was obsession. It was reverence. And it was terrifying. The worst part? That night at dinner, she was cheerful. Laughing, asking me about my day. She told me the meatloaf was from a new recipe she found in a church cookbook. She kissed me goodnight. I lay there in the dark, next to a woman who was smiling in her sleep. And I realized something that made it hard to breathe. Whatever was happening between her and that dog, I wasn't part of it. And I never had been. The video wouldn't stop playing in my mind. Even after I closed the laptop and deleted the sync file, the images lingered like smoke in a locked room. I kept telling myself, maybe I had misunderstood what I saw. That maybe it was symbolic. A spiritual ritual. Harmless. Strange, yes, but not dangerous. But denial only lasts so long. I started watching more footage. Older days, skipped over timestamps. I wanted to believe it had been an isolated moment. A one-time thing. But it wasn't. There was a pattern. It happened every Tuesday and Friday. Same time. Same steps. Same look in her eyes. I charted it all in a notepad like some kind of investigator, trying to make sense of what no sane person should ever have to make sense of. She would draw the blinds, light one candle. Always the same orange wax pillar. She'd sit in front of the dresser mirror, place her hands on Barney's head, and speak in whispers. Sometimes she'd sing. Once, she placed her forehead to his and stayed completely still for 13 minutes. I counted. 13 minutes, no movement. Just silence, skin to fur. Like she was trying to download herself into him. And every time, he just stared. No tail wagging. No playful barking. No signs of a dog at all. It was the eyes that started to get to me. Barney had soft, warm eyes. The kind that melted strangers and soothed you during bad days. But lately, they weren't warm. They were focused, calculating. And somehow, God help me, human, there was one moment on a Friday afternoon that broke something in me. She had just finished her usual ritual, the blood drop and whispering, when she leaned into Barney and said something I couldn't hear. But I saw her mouth the words. I played it back in slow motion, paused it, stared at her lips. "I know you're still in there," she whispered. "I feel you. Still in there." Still. That word. It spun around in my skull like a buzzsaw. Still in there. As if someone else was in there. As if she believed Barney was more than just a dog. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went looking. Through drawers, closets, behind the old trunks in the basement. And I found more than I bargained for. Tucked behind the heater was a small metal box. Old, locked with a clasp. I forced it open with a screwdriver and immediately wished I hadn't. Inside were photographs. Black and white, grainy, almost faded to dust. Images of Marianne as a much younger woman, standing beside Barney? No, not Barney, but a dog who looked exactly like him. The same coat, same stripe on the muzzle, same posture. The photos were dated 1987. We didn't even meet until 1990. I stared at them, disbelief pressing on my lungs. It had to be another dog. Maybe a relative? Maybe she always liked that breed. But then I found the letters, folded neatly, sealed in wax. Yellowed paper, handwritten in her careful cursive. I opened one. He came back again. The others don't understand, but I know it's him. I can feel his weight when he lies beside me. The way he watches. The dreams. The warmth. He's mine again. The ritual works. I just have to keep the bond strong. Feed him. Love him. Bleed if I have to. Feed him. Love him. Bleed. There were 6 letters, each one more unhinged than the last, talking about the tether, the soul vessel, and some entity named Amen. She kept calling it a gift, a second chance. He was taken from me once, never again. That's when it all clicked. Barney wasn't just a dog to her. He was someone, or at least, she believed he was. Someone who had come back, reincarnated, bound to her through rituals I didn't understand and couldn't even begin to accept. I remembered the time she lost her first fiancé. She told me once, long ago, that he died suddenly. No details, just that it wrecked her. She never spoke his name. I never asked. I respected the silence. But now I was wondering if his name had been Amen. And if she believed, no, if she knew, he had returned to her. Not as a man, but as this dog. And suddenly, so much made sense. The way she doted on Barney more than any pet should be doted on. The way she protected him, whispered to him, locked herself away with him. The nightly routines, the blood, the journals. She didn't see Barney as a companion. She saw him as her lost love. And I, her husband of 36 years, was the outsider, the placeholder, the inconvenient shadow standing between her and the thing she truly worshipped. I sat in the garage that night, lights off, journal in hand, trying not to cry. Because this wasn't infidelity in the traditional sense. There was no other man, no affair, but my wife was in love with someone else. Someone who may have been dead for decades. Someone she believed now lived in the body of our dog. And that kind of betrayal? That kind was worse than any affair I could have imagined. I stopped trying to reason with it. By the time I reached the 4th week of watching her every move, my mind had already twisted itself into a knot-too-tangled to unravel. It wasn't about answers anymore. It was about survival. About clinging to what scraps of sanity I had left in a house where love once lived and something else now haunted the walls. I wasn't sure if it was her, the dog, or both. But I knew the woman I married was slipping away. And I feared who, or what, was taking her place. The day it escalated was a Sunday. Clear skies, cool breeze. On the surface, everything was normal. But Marianne was acting off. Not in a nervous way, no, she was calm. Too calm. Serene in that eerie way people get when they've made a decision you're not part of. She cooked breakfast, humming softly. Set the table. Fed Barney first, like always. Then she placed my plate in front of me, touched my shoulder, and smiled. "You should rest today," she said. "Don't worry about anything." It sounded like kindness. It wasn't. Later that afternoon, I noticed something strange with the cameras. 2 of them had gone dark, just black screens. One from the hallway, and the one in the bedroom. I checked the feed twice, 3 times. Nothing. I ran a diagnostic from the app, and it reported manual disconnection. Someone had pulled the plugs. Not a glitch. Not a power outage. She knew. I don't know how. I don't know when. But she knew I'd been watching. And instead of confronting me, she simply erased the evidence. I felt a rush of cold that went deeper than skin. It wrapped around my spine like a hand. That evening, I followed her out of the house without her knowing. She took Barney with her, walking toward the tree line at the edge of our property. I stayed far enough behind to not be seen, stepping slowly, my feet careful on the dead leaves. She was murmuring something under her breath as she walked, stroking Barney's head. He trotted beside her like a soldier beside a general. They reached the woods and didn't stop. She went deeper, until the shadows swallowed them whole. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. I couldn't hear them anymore. Couldn't see a trace. Just silence and that sick feeling in my gut that something unholy was happening not far from me. I called her name once. No answer. Then again louder. Still silence. When she returned, it was nearly dark. Her hands were covered in dirt. Barney's coat was soaked. She smiled at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "We just needed some time to ourselves." That night, I locked the bedroom door for the first time in our marriage. I couldn't risk being near her in my sleep. I moved to the guest room, lying awake in the dark, watching the hallway under the door for shadows. And that's when I heard it. The growl. Low, deep, not quite dog-like, not quite human. I sat up, holding my breath. It came again, from down the hall, near the bedroom. Then silence, then footsteps, 4 of them slow and deliberate, padding across the wood floor. They stopped outside my door, and then something scraped claws, maybe, against the wood. Softly. Once, I didn't sleep. In the morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Pancakes, coffee, soft laughter. But her eyes were sharper now. Less cloudy. Focused. That's when she said it. "I know you've been watching." I froze. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't accuse. She said it the way someone might say, "It's supposed to rain later." A simple fact. Unemotional. She poured syrup onto her pancakes and continued. "You think you're protecting yourself, but you don't understand." He came back to me because he had to, because I asked. I stared at her, trying to find a trace of the woman I once knew. "Who, Marianne?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Who do you think came back?" She smiled. "You already know." She fed Barney a piece of pancake. He ate it without looking at me. I stood slowly. "This isn't normal. This isn't love. You're obsessed. You're sick, Marianne." She didn't flinch, just tilted her head and said, "You're not part of this bond. You never were. He was first. He'll be last. You're just a pause." A pause. 36 years, and I was a pause. I left the house that afternoon. Sat in the car for hours, parked by the lake where we used to picnic. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My heart wouldn't slow down. She had crossed a line I couldn't follow her across. Not just emotionally, spiritually, mentally. She believed something ancient had returned to her. Something she had once loved. Something she was willing to bleed for, lie for, even kill for. And now I had seen too much. I wasn't just an outsider. I was a threat. And in her eyes, threats had to be removed. I knew it was over the moment I found the final letter. It wasn't hidden this time. It was placed right on my nightstand, like an invitation or a challenge, folded neatly, sealed with a wax stamp in the shape of a spiral. One I'd never seen before, but which now made my stomach turn the moment I looked at it. I opened it slowly, expecting insanity, maybe cruelty. But what I read chilled me more than either. You were never meant to find the truth. You kept prying, digging, spying, You broke the bond of trust long before I ever broke anything else. You've seen too much now. You can't unsee. I wish you could. I truly do. But he remembers, and he doesn't forgive like I do. You'll feel him soon. You'll hear him breathing behind the walls. You'll know it's time when the lights flicker and the house feels cold. When you feel him watching, don't fight it. Let go. She didn't sign it with her name. She signed it with a symbol, a crescent over a flame. The air in the room shifted after I finished reading it. I can't explain it. Only that I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone. The walls, the floor, even the light above seemed to lean in toward me, as if the house itself had changed sides. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I left the house again. Went to the police station. Not to file a report, because what would I even say? That my 60-year-old wife believed our dog was the reincarnation of her dead fiancé, and that she was feeding it her own blood? That she'd been performing strange rituals in the woods, and might now be trying to kill me with some invisible force? No, no cop would believe that. But I had to say something. I told them I feared for my safety, that my wife was acting increasingly unstable, that I suspected animal abuse, possible self-harm. They listened politely, took a few notes, then gave me a number for a counselor and said I could request a welfare check if things got worse. Things were already worse. When I returned home, it was dark. The porch light was off. The house looked vacant, but I knew she was in there. I stepped inside cautiously. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and something metallic, coppery like blood. "Marianne?" I called. No answer. I moved slowly through the living room. The curtains were all drawn. The candle she always lit during her rituals was burning low on the floor, surrounded by what looked like old bones, small ones. Animal, I hoped. The silence was alive. Every creak of the floorboard under my feet felt like a warning. Every shadow on the wall seemed to breathe. Then I saw Barney. He was sitting at the end of the hallway, perfectly still, staring at me. His eyes were wide, unblinking. His mouth was closed. Not panting, not alert, just watching. And then he stood up, on two legs, just for a moment. A single, horrifying moment. His back arched upright. His front paws hung limp like arms. His spine curved. And I swear to everything holy, I saw the shape of a man inside that silhouette. Then he dropped down and bolted into the bedroom. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My body refused to obey. But then I heard her voice. "Come see my love." It came from the bedroom. Soft, warm, so familiar, but wrong. I walked. I don't know how. My legs moved without my permission. I crossed the hallway like a man stepping into his own grave. The door was slightly ajar. Candlelight flickered from within. I pushed it open. She was lying on the bed, wearing a white gown. Her eyes were closed. Her hands rested on her chest. And Barney lay beside her, breathing slowly. For a moment, I thought she was dead, but then she smiled. Her eyes fluttered open, and she whispered, "He's fully returned now." I stepped back. "What did you do?" She sat up, touched Barney's head gently. "I finished the rite. The bond is complete. He remembers everything now." I looked into Barney's eyes, and they weren't a dog's eyes. They were aware, intelligent, and angry. I ran, out the door, into the yard. I didn't look back. I stayed in a motel that night, slept with the lights on. I didn't return for 3 days. When I finally worked up the nerve to go back, the house was empty. No Marian, no Barney, no signs of a struggle. No letter this time. Just one thing left behind. A single photograph on the kitchen table. It was the old black and white image again. Marianne standing beside the original Barney. Only now, The photo had changed. I don't know how, but in this version, I was gone. Cut out, like I'd never existed. And at the bottom, written in ink, the pause has passed. The circle is closed. I left and never went back. And if you're listening to this, if you're still tempted to know what I saw, what I learned, just remember this. Some secrets aren't buried. They're waiting. And once you see them, they see you too. I moved far away, changed my number, left no forwarding address. But some nights, when the wind howls just right and the lights flicker without reason, I swear I hear scratching at the door. Not like a dog. Slower, measured, with intention. And sometimes, in the dark corners of my dreams, I see her standing at the edge of the woods again. White gown, candle in hand, and those eyes, Barney's eyes, glowing from the shadows beside her. I wake up cold, every time. So if you ever find love that feels too deep, too ancient, if you ever feel watched when you're alone, if your dog ever stares at you for too long without blinking, don't ignore it. Don't ask questions, because once the circle is complete, it doesn't break. It waits, and one day, it calls you home.